I'm doing good. Last time I saw you, I think we both had a lot more hair, and it's been I think last time I saw you was I refereed a game of yours back in the late '90s, I think, and you had this comedian on your staff named Bob McKeag. And,
yes, you played for Bob, right?
Yeah, so I was in the locker room doing my pregame chat with my partners, and you and Coach McKeag walked by. Coach McKeag sticks his head in and says, "I hope you ref better than you played."
Ouch.
that was a great way to start.
I remember he got, I can't think of her name right now. Who was the young lady who was such a good referee?
Jackie Funk.
Yeah, Jackie. I remember when Bob was the girls' coach, Jackie was calling one of his games, and I think maybe she went to Woodson. And after Jackie made a call that Bob didn't like, Bob says to her, "Why don't you just sing the school song the next time you make that call?"
That's famous with the referees in the area. I mean,
yes.
Jackie's got a lot of mileage. I mean, the Keg stories, the guy is truly a gifted comedian. So
Bob's never a piece of work.
He is. So anyway, Coach, thanks for doing this. I don't think you're much of a Facebook guy, but during the pandemic, we started a Facebook group for former Northern Virginia players, coaches, fans, referees, and it was a great way to reconnect and talk about the great moments, great players, great coaches. And along the way, I started doing podcasts because during Black History Month, Jim Lewis had done so many great things. He was the first Black player to play in the Northern Virginia integrated leagues. Actually, he integrated the league himself. Became the first Black player at West Virginia University, integrated the Duke coaching staff as well. So I'm like, we really got to get this guy in front of the camera on tape. And then I did a few more, and people have really enjoyed, hearing the old stories from the guys and the women who have kind of formed our local tradition.
Well, I think it's great that you're doing it. And I tell people all the time, I'm so proud that I got to both play in the Northern region and coach in it. And it's just been, a wonderful experience for me from beginning to this point right now.
Yeah, it's exciting times. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. I did a podcast with Red Jenkins yesterday, and we were talking about some of the coaches of the second wave of coaches that he coached against. The first wave was Clinton Hanna and Charlie Thompson, and Don McCool, and all those guys, Dick Wickline, Jim Warren, and then came Wendell Byrd, Martino, all that kind of the new wave, Ryan Mitras, and Gary Hall. And one thing he said was the guys he really respected were you and Gary Hall, Coach Hall. And one of the reasons why is that you guys were lifers, but not only that, you guys, the game has gotten so tough, the game has changed, and you guys have been able to stay with it and do it. And Coach Jenkins has a lot of respect that you guys have been able to do that.
Well, and it's funny because I kind of look at Red as a little bit like my grandfather in coaching, because my high school coach, Gabe Oliverio, played for Red. And so, and then I played for Gabe, and we've tried to get together every once in a while, go out to lunch, but Gabe's a hard one to get, but I've stayed in very close contact with Red. But going back to my youngest days as a player, one of my first jobs was working at Red's basketball camp. And then even before that, in fourth grade, going to his basketball camp, the Northern Virginia Basketball School. And I was thinking the other day, I remember in fourth grade still winning a trophy at that camp as a little boy. And that meant so much to me and kind of maybe started me on this journey that, gosh, I'm kind of good at this. And this is something I really like. So I owe so much to Red. Yeah,
it's funny. The coaches of those days, they were truly icons in the area when they walk around. They were almost celebrities. Derek Hensley, Carl Hensley's son, Carl Hensley coached obviously at Edison, later on Lake Braddock. He told a story that when they went to a Pizza Hut after the game, they got a standing ovation. I mean, the coaches and the players of the old generation were truly celebrities. The games meant so much. And Red really elevated the game himself. I mean, he took the game so seriously. He had that camp. He was always innovating. So I played against him, and it's funny. I didn't like him very much Yeah, because
No.
I never beat him. I was freshman JV varsity. I was 0 for 10 or 11 or whatever. So, but it was great. It's been great for me to reconnect with him the last year or two. So anyway, by the way, whatever happened to Gabe Oliverio? That's a name that I heard a lot about a long time ago, but I haven't heard that name in many years. What is he doing now?
Well, Gabe has 5 children, and he lived in the Braddock area, and he was very involved with his kids. And I tell you, Julian, it's actually a very, very sad story. One of his sons was starting a restaurant down, I want to say it's in the Carolina area, and his son actually died in a fire. And Gabe has been going down there. Another one of the sons is Brett Oliverio, who used to work with the Sports Junkies, believe it or not. He was like a producer for them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He decided to take over the restaurant to continue his brother's dream. And again, I haven't been very much in contact with Gabe, but I know he's down there a lot helping his son and doing that. And, you know, one thing I just learned about Gabe, it's all about family. And he, obviously he was a wonderful coach and man, but he's just a wonderful father and still, helping his kids out and being around them and being there for them. So I think it's a great lesson for all of us.
Yeah, it's one of those last names that they are fixtures in our basketball community, Oliverios.
Right.
So many of them. Sometimes I probably get them confused, but I'm really sorry to hear that story.
And Gabe was a great player at Woodson High School and went down and played at Indiana. He was one of really the early big time players to come out of the northern region area. And he's kind of forgotten. A lot of people don't remember what a great player Gabe was. We maybe remember Jimmy O'Brien but Gabe gets kind of lost in the shuffle, but he was a heck of a player.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I'm sorry I missed him. I'd like to see him play. So in terms of your stick-to-itiveness, what makes you endure? Like there's so many coaches that you've seen retire and do other things. A lot of them were young. I mean, they started coaching when they were maybe right out of college, and they might have retired before they were 50, and they great coaches and won a lot of games. What has made you different? I'm sorry.
I think there's maybe a couple of things, Julian. I think when you can marry your work with your passion, that can lead to longevity. And I have always just loved everything about sports, having a ball in my hand and playing and competing. I think that's a big part of it. I think obviously having had great coaches around me that I've gotten to work with has helped. And I've always just liked being around young people. And, even, today, we just started with Meridian doing some workouts in the summer. The high point of my day will be getting to be in the gym and being around those young men and the energy they bring. And maybe that I can still, at this point, give them a little something to help make them better players and better people. Just the energy that I get from being around young people keeps me young. So I think the passion for it and, me getting something back has been a big part of me staying around the game.
Well, we're very lucky that you have, and the kids and the parents that have played for you are very, very lucky as well. So tell us a little bit about Meridian. So Meridian, for folks who don't know, is the old George Mason High School in Falls Church. It was right. It's at least it used to be a single A school. I know they changed things around. So it played schools, at least when I was in school, and refereeing like Luray and Brentsville.
The old Bull Run district.
The old Bull Run, yeah. They didn't play. Right. So tell us a little bit about Meridian, who they play, and kind of the kids that you get into your program.
Right. So Meridian, we play AAA level.
Oh, you're AAA now.
The school's gotten bigger and right. Continued to grow. I think it's around between 900 and 1,000, and it may even grow to 4A in the next few years because they're still building in Falls Church. But it is the kids that just live in the proper city of Falls Church. It's a wonderful community. It's pretty near where I grew up. And we will play teams like Brentsville, Warren County, Skyline. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity for me. So when I retired and left Chantilly, I wasn't sure that I was done yet, but I knew that I wanted to take a little time away to reflect and think about it. And this spring, Marvin Wooten, the athletic director there, who previously had been the head coach at South Lake, so I think he'd gotten to know me a little bit. He called me up and said, "Hey, is the itch still there? Are you still interested?" And I said, "Well, certainly enough that I'd like to come in and talk with you." And we talked, and I was really intrigued with it. And, we're still at the very early stages, obviously, and I'm just still getting to know the kids in the community, but I'm really enjoying it so far.
Well, that's great. When I lived in Charlottesville, I officiated back then as well. And I used to go out in the country for the single A and double A games. Back then it was only 3 classifications, but I used to love taking those hour car rides with my partner. We go to Cumberland, we go to Prince Edward County, and
Right.
Fluvanna County, and the gyms would be packed. And it
Right.
was so much excitement. It was so much excitement because the whole community would be there. And those games were big deals in those small towns.
So the thing that people have told me that's interesting is the first thing, wow, the bus rides. And I said, well, they're going to be long rides. And I know some people were like, boy, I don't think I want to do that. And the thing that I've said to a lot of people is, what I didn't want to do anymore was get on a bus for the 100th time and go to Westfield or go to Centerville or go to South Lakes. I'm really excited about doing something different and going into some gyms that I have never gone in. And to what you said, I've heard a lot of people, some games will show up, and in the past, obviously pre-COVID and whatnot, the gym would be packed when the team would be walking off the bus going into the gym for the JV game beforehand. Mm-hmm. So I'm really intrigued and excited about doing something that I've never done and going to some gyms and some places that I've never been to.
Have you talked to your old buddy Wendell Byrd about the gig?
I have not talked to Wendell. I've talked to our players about Wendell, and and again, generations passed, and I've told them, there was a heck of a athlete that went to this school who had a huge impact on sports in Northern Virginia. So I've tried to make them aware of Wendell. I'm hoping to at some point reach out to him. When he's up here, I would love to come in and talk to our team and maybe come to a practice and do some things. So I'm looking forward to reaching out and talking to Wendell at some point down the road.
Yeah, I used to love watching Coach Byrd and Coach Smith go at it. You guys had some great battles, and your players knew each other really well because often they played
Yes.
AAU together. I had a couple of the kids on both sides at one point, and I really enjoyed that matchup.
Well, it's funny. I remember at some point I said to Wendell, after I think because he got the better of me more times than I got the better of him. I said to him, I can't remember the name of the movie, those movies, but you remember the Danny Glover, Mel Gibson movies, the cop movies they made?
Lethal Weapon. Yeah.
We should just go out and make a movie like those guys. I feel like it's like every time we go up against each other, it's one of these crazy games and unbelievable games. But I love coaching against Wendell. His teams were great. They played, one thing that, Wendell, I don't think ever got credit for is South Lakes always had such great talent, but his teams played so hard. Mm-hmm. He, his kids, and then sometimes his teams that weren't as talented played even harder than the, Grant Hill teams. And either between the talent or the effort or both, his teams were just really a nightmare to play against.
It's tough to coach when you don't have talent, but it's also tough to coach when you have a lot of talent. The expectations are through the roof. You can lose kids to the private schools. So guys like Mike Henson at TC Williams, Alexandria City, and Coach Byrd sometimes won't get the credit for being the coach that they are, because a lot of things they do are behind the scenes. Just keeping the program intact. Letting the kids express themselves. Letting Grant Hill play point guard, even though most coaches, dude, you're 6'8", get in the middle. No, he's a point guard, and he let him do that. So there is a special talent to coaching kids with a lot of talent.
No question. I think an underrated skill in coaching is, it's not just teaching skills, but being able to communicate and talk to kids and be honest, and not only be honest with what you're saying to them, but honestly hear what they're saying to you and process that and think about it. And so that communication, which should be a two-way street, is so important. And even more important, I think, when you're dealing with like really talented players who really have high goals and want to do things beyond high school. How do you help get there?
Yeah. So, Coach, what have you learned in your time off away from being a head coach? I know you worked for that really tough guy, Rusty Payne, last year. But what have you learned? Do you think you're going to run the same type of patterns and the same philosophy that you use at Chantilly, where you always had you always had decent talent generally, or because you're coaching a smaller school, it might be a little different and the game's evolved. Maybe there's more three-pointers. So, what do you think? What do you think about this year in terms of your philosophy?
Well, I think, there's a couple things to that, Julian. I think, one part of that, the answer to that is, okay, how am I going to change as a manager of the program? And I think one thing that I learned as I reflected when I got away from Chantilly is one of the things that made me step down was I had really gotten tired, or not tired, maybe a little burned out of a lot of the other things that went along with being a head coach. Managing your coaches, dealing with parents, dealing with administrators. And I think I let that consume me a little bit too much. When I got back into coaching and when I helped Rusty with the freshmen, what really rekindled it was, gosh, I love working with kids. I love teaching the game. I love interacting. I love being around them. And so one thing that I will change is, obviously, as a head coach, I still have to, deal with those other parts of being a head coach that are there. But I need to keep the main thing. And remember that, okay, maybe I've just had a contentious meeting with the parent, but I'm doing this because I love working with the kids. And my lasting memory at the end of the day should be, that's the main reason that I'm doing this, to be around the kids. And maybe there's some other stuff that comes with it sometimes that you have to deal with, but I can't let that color how I feel about the whole thing. In terms of scheme and coaching, I've always believed that you have to grow with the game. The game is always changing. You got to be a student of the game. I think you have to have a system, so you're not changing everything year to year, but a system that's flexible, that can adapt to the players and what your players can do. So part of what I'm doing now in our open gyms and the different things is learning our players and coming up with an idea of what's going to put them in the best situation to be successful this year. Okay. So I've always tried to do, and I think I've learned, kind of more and more as I've gotten older. And there's certainly some things that I believe in that are maybe old school, but there's also some things that I've learned and have adapted over time.
So you just kind of referred to tough parents when you have to try to, that's one of the things you have to just take as part of the job, get through that, and you can coach the kids and you can get back to what you love. Sure. So when you started coaching about the time I graduated from high school, I was on Coach McKeag's second team at Robinson, 1984. At that time, my dad wouldn't have dreamed of calling Coach McKeag and said, "Why isn't Julian playing?" He would have been happy if Julian was even on the team. It's not something that you thought about doing in those days. Maybe it happened occasionally. Maybe if your father was the head of the alumni or something like that, but I just didn't hear much about that. When did parents begin to change and get more aggressive about telling you what needs to be done?
Well, I think you always have, even back to the beginning of my career, you would have some parents that were very invested and very involved. I think going back to the 80s, you would have that. I think it's maybe there's more of it today because, and again, I think, Julian, when you and I were growing up, I was a multiple sport athlete. We played everything. Kids today and parents today, they seem to specialize earlier. And for a basketball kid, if they have a personal trainer that they're going to, and then they're playing AAU, and boy, it becomes a big investment in terms of a family's time and finances. And that being the case, they want the high school to have the outcome that they feel that they've earned and they've put into it. So I think the rise of personal trainers, year-round basketball, which probably gets bigger and bigger into the 90s and the aughts, has led to more parents being more involved in their kids' basketball careers.
How do you feel about personal trainers? Like, for example, my son's a soccer player. You may see him wandering around the back. He uses a personal trainer for his skill, and he doesn't. The personal trainer is also a head coach of his own team, so he doesn't tell him how to play within a game, but he's very helpful at working on his skill level. How do you feel about that in basketball? I'm sure maybe sometimes trainers can go too far and say, "Hey, look, you need to look for your shot out there."
I think there's definitely a place for personal trainers, and I don't begrudge people making a living on basketball, and there's some very good ones out there. I've always felt like, I would love my players to come to me, and before the family spends all that money, come down and said, "Hey, I think you need to work in this and this and this. Here are some drills. Come into the gym." I've always kind of taken it a little bit personally. And again, I'm not begrudging personal trainers. And obviously, I think a lot of them are very good at what they do. But I wish sometimes families would use the resources in their own community that are free before they spend that money. So that's kind of my financial advice there. The other thing that we used to always laugh about, I remember in the early 90s, you started hearing about shot doctors and personal trainers and shooting camps. And I used to tell people, boy, if a kid really wants to get on the floor, who's going to have the charge camp? Who's going to run the box out drill camp? Because, there's lots of ways for a guy to be a good player and help the team. It doesn't necessarily mean just having the ball in your hands all the time and shooting the basketball. And the other thing I tell parents to understand with the personal trainer, when the personal trainer says the high school coach is crazy for not playing your son and your son is doing so well, how much are you paying that man? He's getting a paycheck from you. He's not going to come back and say, boy, these training sessions are really going terrible. I understand why that high school coach isn't playing your son. I mean, it's his vested interest that the parents feel like his skill is really going through the roof, and the person making the mistake is the high school coach. So I just think parents need to be a little bit guarded with the information they're getting from a person that's on their payroll, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny because, again, in soccer, it's different. I didn't play soccer. My son only plays soccer. I wish he played basketball, but it wasn't meant to be. So, but it's funny in soccer, every coach sees something different. In basketball, we know good players. You rebound, you score. I mean, if you and Wendell Byrd have a team, you guys may disagree on one or two players, but generally the same four or five are going to definitely play. That's the way basketball is. Soccer, everyone sees something completely different because you don't have the stats of midfielders and stuff. So you could have three different coaches. One will hate your kid, one will love them, and one will think he's okay. And it drives you crazy because they'll switch coaches all the time, and you're so anyway. That's a separate issue. Well, what about another thing that affects coaches today that we didn't deal with when I played and when you played is social media. You get these kids that after a game they're already tweeting out their highlights, or do you find social media affects your job now?
I think it's hard, and I think social media is something that obviously is not going away. I try to make rules with my teams that I remember adding a team rule that don't discuss anything to do with this team on social media. The players know that, like, when I'm talking to them in the locker room is not the time for them to be going through their phone. It's one that it scares me because I'm not a social media guy, and I know I'm a little bit of a dinosaur. But again, while I'm not going to totally discount social media, and I'm not going to tell them they have to get rid of their phones or anything like that, I do believe in human interaction. And, you know, I do like face-to-face stuff. And I think there's enough pressure out there and stuff going on that they're going to have the social media. I think if I give them a little different view about it sometimes, I think that's probably okay. I think if somebody's out there saying, you know, don't put all your dirty laundry on social media. If somebody's saying, hey, take a couple minutes or maybe even a couple hours and just put the phone away and have a conversation, I think that's going to be okay. So I think I'm going to continue to be the guy who says, okay, I know social media is out there, but I'm going to be the guy that says, you know, it doesn't have to dominate your life all the time. And I hope that's okay. There's still a place for me, but I think that's the guy I'm going to be in terms of social media.
I think that's actually a pretty balanced approach. I think that hopefully that'll work for you, and as it encroaches on our lives more and more. What about the AAU? I know, you know, the coaches I've talked to, everyone has a different point of view on it, but it's never really very positive. I mean, obviously the kids are getting greater. Let's say, for example, back in, I coached Jeremiah Andrews and Novi United, probably around great kid, around 2000. At the time, there wasn't that many AAU programs, so only your good players played AAU. Your starters played AAU probably. Nowadays, there's an AAU player for everybody. Even kids that don't.
Here's my line on AAU now. I tell parents and players this. I believe there are lots of great reasons to play AAU. You can play because you want to be seen, and that's a great reason. You know, you go to tournaments. If you're a high-level player, it's an opportunity to get exposure and get seen. You can play AAU because you like the coach. You know, you have a relationship. He's coached you with you a few years. That's a great thing. You can play AAU because you like the group of guys that you've been with, and you've done that. So I tell players there are lots of really strong reasons to play AAU. But if you're playing AAU to improve as a player, you might be missing the boat a little bit, because you go away for a weekend and you play 2 or 3 games and maybe you get 6 shots and whatever. I mean, don't let playing AAU replace getting into the gym, working on your skills, working on your game, going to the weight room, lifting weights, doing those things. These are the things that actually are going to help you improve as a player. Again, playing AAU is great, but it should not be. I think too many players today, their vehicle for getting better is playing AAU. That's not enough. That won't do it. There's a place for AAU, but if a guy wants to be a great player and improve as a player, you've got to do the work outside of AAU basketball.
It's so funny you said that, because I've been away from basketball for a while, because I stopped officiating around 2005. But Jason Coleman, who played for Lake Braddock in the late 80s, I've been going around watching his son play. He just transferred from West Springfield to Flint Hill. And so I went to watch a lot of summer league games for the first time in many years. And some of these private schools, they have like 20 players at a summer league game. They have like 15 players on the bench. I saw O'Connell with he's the son of the legendary coach. Is that Vetter's son or anyway? Yeah, I think it is. So I was just thinking, some of the kids played like 3 or 4 minutes, and so they're going to these summer league games and stuff every single night. I'm like, that can't be the best use of time, you know, watching everyone else play. I guess it's kind of the same thing as AAU.
Yeah, I would tell kids, like, you know, back in the day before we had AAU, I would say, hey, playing summer league is not your route to getting better. It may be your route to, you know, if you play good and I see it, maybe that helps change your role. But your route to getting better is what you do, like, you know, in your neighborhood community, on your court, going out and running in the morning, going to the weight room, working on my left hand. I mean, doing the work is what gets you better. When you get in a game for maybe 5 minutes or maybe 15, you can show what you've improved on, and maybe somebody sees you, right place, right time, and it helps you with exposure. But again, don't confuse AAU with being your vehicle to become a better player.
Yeah, that's great. It's great advice. Well, I want to go back to the beginning a little bit here. I know that you went to Stuart and you played football and basketball. When did you guys move to the DC area? Are we always here? And
I was born in DC. My parents originally lived in Arlington, and I was born in DC, Sibley Hospital. And then we moved to Falls Church in the early 60s, kind of the Sleepy Hollow, Lake Barcroft area, Falls Church, and grew up there. I wanted to make sure I mentioned when I talked to you, Julian, I grew up playing sports in the Annandale Boys Club, and that was a wonderful thing for me as a young man. The Germains who ran the Annandale Boys Club were kind of pillars of the community. And I played everything. I played football and basketball, baseball, soccer, and loved all of it. And then eventually went to Jeb Stuart High School, which is now Justice High School.
And so when you were young, what was your, I mean, you weren't a specialist, you're a multi-sport athlete. What was your favorite sport? What sports were you best at when you were young?
I actually loved everything. Baseball was my dad's sport, and my dad played baseball at William and Mary. He was a very good player there. That was probably my worst sport, and so I wasn't good. I was a good soccer player. Actually played on a travel team, the '61 Red Wings. Look that up. That's one of the legendary travel teams. Actually, I played for 3 or 4 seasons. We eventually won the national championship down in the Orange Bowl. That group of guys, and
that's amazing.
Played on the Olympic team. It was a very talented group. I got to play with them. And I actually stopped playing with the Red Wings because around 7th grade, I wanted to play football. And they wanted you to specialize to play spring and fall. And I wanted to play football. So I had to give it up and play football. But I love football, but I always loved basketball. I always loved basketball. Was one of those sports, whether it was football, you love the games, you hated practice. Basketball, I loved everything about it. I loved the practices. I loved the games. I loved being in the gym. I loved the ball in my hands. And it was always, kind of a love affair with basketball.
So one of the guys that helped me start this group, his name is Keith Leonard. Keith played at Annandale. I think he's 82. And he's a big Annandale Boys Club guy. He played on one of their national championship teams as well. And it is a shame. It is a shame what happened to Annandale's Boys Club because, when I was a kid, they were good in everything. They were really good in football. They're definitely good in travel basketball. I used to call it county back then, soccer as well. But basically they've kind of fallen apart. It's kind of a shame.
Right. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's changing demographics, and I don't know. People don't really. Maybe they just can't find the time to get their kids to practices and the things you need to support teams and leagues. But yeah. I think every young man, young woman should have the opportunity to have a boys club or something like that in that community that provides that outlet.
Yeah, it's too bad. Did you play county basketball as well, or just the soccer? No?
I actually just played in the house leagues growing up. Played, I played for some great men. I think the 4 years from 5th grade to 8th grade, our team, we were able to keep it. I think we lost like 1 game over 4 years, and played with some guys that I would later play with in high school. So
you entered Jeb Stuart, and so you're class of 80. You're class of 79.
79.
Right? 79, yes. Right? So you're probably around the time of Ferdy Onion, I believe.
Yeah, Ferdy and I are same class. We're teammates, and Ferdy was a hoot. He was a big kid, and boy, he could shoot the basketball. And obviously, as you know, Ferdy went and had a great career for Gary at American. And a lot of people don't realize when American upset Georgetown, Ferdy hit the shot over Patrick Ewing that provided the winning bucket in that game.
Yeah, Chris Naki tells a great story about that game. I think Chris was either on the bench or on the team, but he was there for that game, and they just had to hold on.
Well, and Chris will tell you, Chris and I can share some stories about Ferdy, because I think Chris and I had kind of similar jobs in high school and college, was basically trying to keep Ferdy out of harm's way, away from the court, if you will. But boy, Ferdy was a heck of a player.
Yeah, good player. Yeah. So the demographics of Stuart in those days, it was not as diverse as it is now, but it was a pretty diverse school, right? You had Stuart was one of the first county school to have a lot of Black students. Right. It was, you had the Route 1 corridor, and then you had Stuart. Most of the schools in the western part of the county didn't have a lot of African Americans. Even when I went there, they were just beginning to have a lot of African Americans. besides South Lakes, of course. What was it? What were the demographics like at Stuart when you were there?
I'm kind of pulling this off the top of my head, but I would say we were probably 75 to 80% white, and then probably 10 to 12% African American, maybe a little bit more, maybe 15%. And then at the time, not many Hispanics or Asians. We started, if you remember this, in the 70s with the breakdown of the Vietnam War. Just as I was leaving Stuart, there was a large influx in the Vietnamese community that came to Jeb Stuart. So it was diverse and probably very diverse compared to a lot of Fairfax County schools, but it was growing even more diverse in the years after I left. And again, it's my perspective growing up, but boy, it seemed like it was a great community, that it was diverse, but people got along with each other. There was respect for each other. And I really, loved my experience in high school.
Did you guys make any tournament runs? I remember I saw Ferdy play at Robinson in one of the regional tournaments. I'm not sure what round, because it was the year where they had all 4 rounds at Robinson, even the round of 16.
Sophomore year, I played a little bit. I was up and down between varsity and JV. We won our district my sophomore year. We beat Madison in the district final that year. I think we maybe even realigned the districts after that. We might have been like the Great Falls that year, and then we went to the Potomac the next year. And again, I think this was back in the time when only your district champions made the regional tournament. And my junior and sophomore years, we lost in the district final one year, and the district semis another year. So we did not make the regional tournament, which was really heartbreaking, because we had good teams. I think my senior year, at part of the year, were ranked in the Post top 20, and I think we ended up like 18-6 or 18-5, something like that. And we had a really nice team. We lost to Woodson that year with Pete Holbert, who was a handful. I had to guard him my senior year, and he had about 6 inches and about 30 pounds on me. So he was a handful.
Yeah. What position did you play? Did you play shooting guard?
I was kind of a stretch 4, actually. We played 4 perimeter players, and Ferdy kind of in and out around the basket. And I was a perimeter player, but I also was like a strong football player. So I could play out on the perimeter and stretch teams. And most teams played 2 posts back then. And so I was also, even though I was undersized, I was strong enough to guard a guy down around the bucket or step out and guard people. So I was kind of like a stretch 4 type.
Yeah. And what kind of coach was Oliverio? And what did you learn from him that later on that you may have thought about when you were approaching your own teams?
Gabe was very demanding. He worked his teams very, very hard. I think he was very innovative as an offensive coach. A lot of the things that I've still done in terms of motion offense, moving the ball, moving players. He was kind of an early proponent of kind of a continuity offense rather than just set plays and things like that. So I think he was a little bit ahead of the game there. Probably the biggest thing that I learned from Gabe was that conditioning was an as important part of winning basketball as was skill development and things like that. He ran us hard, Julian, and there was never a team that we played that was better conditioned than our team. That was something that I definitely learned from Gabe.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk about football a little bit. So did Stuart have a football tradition back then? I know Annandale down the street, was the.
I think Stuart, we were really always more of a football school than a basketball school. Jerry Falls was our head coach, and to me, he's one of the giants of Northern Virginia football, along with Bob Hartage. And Jerry had the misfortune of running into a lot of good Annandale teams over the years. But when we were at Stuart, the thing that our coaches would always talk about, and they would point to with pride, was we were the only team in Northern Virginia, not anymore, but at that day, that had a winning overall record against Annandale, in the early days of Stuart and Annandale. And that was always a big game. And really, that I think when I went to Stuart, you had a bunch of guys: Roger Stillwell, Nick Vidnovic, later Ray Friday, who would go on to be Mike Bragg, who punted with the Redskins, who went on to be great college players and also in some cases NFL players. So there were a number of NFL players, later Charlie Garner, obviously more recently, but a number of NFL players came out of Jeff Stewart High School.
Did you say Mike Bragg was from Jeff Stewart?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I never heard that.
Stewart, then he went down to Richmond, punted down at University of Richmond.
Wow, didn't know that. So what position did you play at Stewart? Were you tight end? Because I know you were tight end.
Tight end and wide receiver. Yeah.
And did you guys throw the ball a lot, or was it more?
We threw it enough. I think I caught 50, 60 balls my senior year. I caught a lot of passes my senior year. We threw it around a little bit. We had a quarterback, Kenny Sylvester, who was a good multiple.
I know Kenny.
Yeah, Kenny. I remember many summers, me and Kenny spending them up on the football field at Stuart, just running routes. And that one thing I learned, like I would always show up to throw with Kenny. Some of our other receivers wouldn't show up. And during the season, Kenny rewarded me for that. I was his favorite target, and he fed me the ball a lot. So I always appreciated that.
I used to play pickup with this crazy guy named Kenny Sylvester, and
Kenny's crazy.
He would just go off sometimes. And finally, a friend of mine, Gerald Purnell, who's actually Oliver Purnell's younger brother, he said to me, Kenny's a good guy. He's just a little crazy. And after a while, I learned how to manage him. But I was just like, well, this guy's crazy.
Yeah. Kenny's a wild child, no question. But he could fling it around. He had a great senior year, and I think we were 7-3, and I think we lost like 2 or 3 very close games. And that was the year Annandale won the state championship. So kind of a typical Stuart refrain. We lose to Annandale, they win the region or the state or whatever. That was kind of our story at Stuart in football.
Who was on that Annandale team that won the states?
Mark Cox was the quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Virginia Tech, right? He went to Tech,
went to Virginia Tech and played there. And they had a tight end, Phil Denfield, who actually played with me on the Red Wings. He was our goalie on the Red Wings. And I also played against him in basketball. And he was a tight end in Annandale. And he made a one-handed catch in the state championship game to win that game. I think Cave Springs, I want to say. I'm not positive about that. But then Phil went down and played at Wake Forest and had a nice career down there. So
Phil Denfield, yeah.
Phil Denfield's one up. He was a Annandale 3-sport athlete, goalie, tight end. He's like all-state tight end, and got the better of him in basketball though a couple times.
What's interesting is so many coaches' kids went to Robinson. Like I knew the Hardages, their daughters were the cheerleaders at head cheerleader at Robinson. Ed Henry, of course, their kids went to Robinson. McCool, she ran track. I knew her pretty well. The Warrens, Jamie and Keith went to Robinson, and then they transferred to play for their dad. And there are more. It's just so funny. All their kids all went to Robinson. Oftentimes, they coach elsewhere. Yeah.
Right. Great community out there. They're a great place to raise kids.
No, it's nice. And at the time, it was more rural than it is now. At the time, it was like the end of the suburbs was Robinson. So what kind of coach was Coach Fall? What did you learn from him? That's a name I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, Jerry Falls is one, and it's still, the stadium is still named after Jerry. It'd be some good history there. He's got a tremendous record as a coach. I think he coached at Stuart for 25 years, and I was there his last couple of years. The thing I loved about Jerry Falls was he got to know you as a full person. He would come and check on you. He was a guidance counselor. He'd call you down to his office and talk to you during the day. And you really got the feeling with Jerry that he cared about you as more than a football player, that he cared about you as a person. And obviously that's something I've tried to take with me and show my players that, there's more than just this basketball. I really care about the total person that you're going to become. And that's something that I learned from Coach Falls, I feel like.
At the time, if you would have guessed whether you'd be a football coach or a basketball coach one day, would you have known you'd be a basketball coach at that time?
I I think I would have probably told you football coach.
Mhm.
Early in my career, I was aiming toward being a head football coach, but I got some opportunities to coach basketball, so I did it. And I loved both. I love both. And it was just kind of almost like a quirk of fate that a head coaching opportunity became available in basketball before football.
Mhm.
I think my path could have gone down, either way the road was. It was just the opportunity that presented itself first for me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the University of the South. I'm not really that familiar with that, but how did you hear about that? Why did you go there? And tell us a little bit about your experience there.
So during my senior year, Coach Falls, again, something I learned from him, he would do a good job, really nice job, trying to get his kids into college to play college football somewhere, and not just the Division I players. Those you learn as a coach, those are the easy ones. Everybody knows about those guys. It's the other guys that maybe don't get so much attention that want to play. And Coach Falls asked me early on, if I wanted to play college football, and encouraged me that there would be a place for me if I wanted to play. And he got my film out to a lot of different Division III schools, all the ODAC schools like Hampton-Sydney and Washington and Lee. I remember like Western Maryland coming to my basketball games, and Sewanee, University of the South, was another school with a good program, very good academic school that he reached out to, that got in contact with me. So I really, just give a lot of credit to Coach Falls, sending my film out a bunch of different places, and then coaches coming and talking to me. And, eventually you visit a few places, and I went to Sewanee, and I really liked Coach Moore, the head coach, and he was the main reason that I went down there to Sewanee, University of the South.
And did you play a lot in football? Did you get there and play, or what was your experience on the football
field?
Yeah,
I had a really nice career. I was a 4-year player. I started 3 years. I was captain my senior year. I made all conference my junior year. And I think like the Tennessean and some of the Tennessee papers kind of had forecasted that I would probably be a small college All-American my senior year. And I had a really good first game against Fisk College. I caught 2 touchdowns my first game. And then I dislocated my elbow against Millsaps my second game, missed 4 or 5 weeks, and kind of had a rough senior year. So my senior year didn't turn out as I might have wished. But all in all, I had a wonderful experience playing football and going to school down there in Sewanee.
Who's your coach at Sewanee?
His name was Horace Moore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a legendary place. Before Horace was the head coach at Sewanee, he was the offensive line coach there for 33 years. And the head coach was a guy by the name of Shirley Majors, who you might have heard of as the father of Johnny Majors, who was an All-American football player and the head coach at Tennessee. The Majors family is kind of big news and did big deal in Tennessee. And so Shirley Majors was the longtime coach, and Horace was his number 1 assistant for many years. And then when Shirley stepped down, Horace took over and coached for about 10 years there, which included my time there.
Did you pay attention to the basketball team while you were down there? Did you see what was going on?
Yeah, I had talked to, I believe it was Rick Jones was the basketball coach, and I had talked to both going down there with the idea that they would be okay. The basketball coach would be okay if I gave it a shot with basketball after football ended. And it's kind of a funny story, Julian. After football ended, I went to a few basketball practices. I was still a little bit beat up from football. I wasn't quite ready to play. And I remember Coach Jones saying, "Listen, Jim, why don't you do this? Go home over Christmas and we report back, say it was like January 2nd or something like that. Your Christmas break is over January 15th. If you feel like you want to do it, come back the 2nd with everybody else." Well, I was going to go home and think about it. I wasn't sure. And while it was home, my grades came in the mail. And John Smith, my father, took one look at those grades and said, you're going to make a choice, and I don't think it's going to be playing basketball. You're going to play one or the other, and you're going to put a lot more into the classwork right now because these grades are not what you're capable of. So I think I was leaning that way anyway, but my dad kind of made a presumptive decision for me, which was the right one.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you graduate from University of the South, and you come back to DC, and you're gonna start teaching and coaching. So when you first came back, you ended up at, I guess you went to St. John's. That was your first job out of
Yes.
college? Yeah.
Yes. So actually, that wasn't the plan. I was going to go to law school. My father was an attorney, and I'd applied to a few law schools and hadn't gotten in. I was going to retake the law boards, and I think I had gotten into W&L, I want to say on like second semester or something like that. So basically I was going to reapply, and the plan was to go to law school, but I really didn't have a gig in between. I wasn't sure what I was going to do besides study for the law boards. And I was talking to my next door neighbor, Mrs. Councilman, who was a wonderful woman whose children all went to St. John's. And she said, well, what do you think about maybe teaching? And I said, well, I think, maybe for a semester or a year or something like that, maybe I would like to do that. Maybe I'd like to teach and coach a little bit. And she says, well, I'm really good friends with the headmaster at St. John's. Can I give him a call? What's your degree? And I said, well, I got a history degree and a political science degree. So long story short, she called him up, and a couple of days later, I was in talking to the headmaster, and he goes, hey, we got 5 world studies classes we'd like you to teach. And he's looking at my resume, and he goes, oh, you play football? Let me walk you down to Coach Waldron, our football coach, and you can talk to him. And the next thing you know, Julian, I was signing a contract to teach 5 world history classes, be the JV football coach, line the fields before the varsity football game, and host bingo once a month for $13,000. And I remember coming home and telling my dad, hey, Dad, I think I'm rich. Look at this. I'm getting paid $13,000.
Yeah. There was no basketball yet. It was just football.
Yeah, actually, I didn't. I never. It's funny you put down about Joe Gallagher, and I can tell you some Joe Gallagher stories. And I got to know Joe, and he was an influence on me. But I didn't coach for Joe. Gabe Oliverio was the varsity coach at McLean at that time, and I went over and coached his freshman team during basketball season. So I would coach football at St. John's and teach there. And then early on, I was going over to McLean and coaching over there. And that's kind of how I began to get to know the people over at McLean.
Did you enjoy the environment at a private school?
I did. It was definitely a learning experience for me. I never took any education classes or anything. I was just thrown into the classroom and suddenly learning how to teach and, deal with kids. And it was a very educational year for me, but I did really enjoy it. And it was an important experience for me growing up.
So then you came out to McLean at a time when there was a lot of great coaches at McLean. You met Freddie Priester was there and a few others. So how did you end up, I guess, because you had helped with Oliverio?
So I'd coached the freshman team, and after 2 years at St. John's, I took a job at Sidwell Friends. But when I had coached at McLean, I made a lot of really great relationships, and I think I did a good job there. I think Bernice Polk, who was the AD there, kind of put my name down as maybe like a future person that she thought could maybe be a head coach down the road. So I got her attention, and then I went to Sidwell Friends, and I taught there, and I coached football and basketball at Sidwell Friends for 2 years. And then the varsity job came open at McLean, and they contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in applying for the head job at McLean. So that's kind of how that all came together.
Did you enjoy Civil Friends? I mean, it's such an amazing school.
Amazing, amazing. And the such, I mean, I think all kids are quality kids, but when you're dealing with the children at that school that are really the best and the brightest, it's kind of awe-inspiring just being around some of those young men and young women. So it's an amazing place, really amazing school. And I learned a lot there. I especially learned Eddie Saw. I coached JV basketball for him. Eddie Saw, kind of a legendary team in DC with the Kenner League and the Summer League. And I got involved in being around the Kenner League a little bit and also helping Eddie run the league and learned a lot about how to be a head coach and how to do some other things like running leagues and camps and things like that. Eddie was a nice influence on me at that point in my life.
Well, speaking of best and brightest, then you come and take the job at McLean, which you get a lot of it's a pretty good, pretty elite demographic as well. Yes. So it must have been a great opportunity for you to be the head coach there.
I was excited, and replacing Gabe was difficult, but I think Gabe was ready to get out of coaching. But I was excited, and then the fun thing was that the group that was my senior group, my first year, had played for me as freshmen. So there was a little history when I came in, and I also came into a nice situation where I had a kid, John Norton. I don't know if you know the Norton family, the great American restaurant chain.
Yeah, because their partner is a guy named Farley who coached my sister in soccer, and his daughters are great soccer players. Yeah.
Yeah, so Randy obviously runs those, and his son John, his senior year, was a very good player for me. John bloomed late, 6'7", could shoot. He ended up going to Lafayette and playing there. And so I kind of walked into that situation. And then we had a young man transfer in from North Carolina, Nate Friends, who was an outstanding high school basketball player, even better high school soccer player. I think he scored the winning goal in the national championship game like 2 years in a row. So suddenly Nate walks in off the street, and I'm like, wow, we're going to be pretty good here. So it was very fortunate for me. I think the timing was good. They were ready to win, and it was a great 3 years there. I really enjoyed my time there.
Well, how did you guys play back then? I mean, as a coach, you played for Oliverio. You knew a little bit of Eddie Saw, also a basketball guy. You had a great football coach, Falls, in terms of connection with the players. What was your philosophy when you first started coaching at McLean?
Well, you may not even believe this, but even though you would look at our group of kids and you might say, boy, they have certain things going, but maybe it's not the most athletic group in the world. And I still believe this to this day. We came out and pressed people a lot because I wanted to send the message to our kids. First, we're not going to back down to anybody. And secondly, you better play really, really hard tonight if we're going to play this way. Because otherwise, if we extend and you don't play hard, we'll get embarrassed out there tonight. So we'd play mostly man-to-man defense. We would press people. We would run and jump. We tried to be really aggressive defensively. And offensively, still, I've always liked to play fast. I don't know if it's because I got a little attention deficit disorder or something, but I don't really love, 30, 40-second transitions. I like to push the ball, and I like to look for quick hitters. And I like to attack offensively and push the tempo. So we played pretty fast back then. And that's something teams, for the most part, we've always tried to attack defensively and push the ball.
Yeah. Well, it seems kind of strange in that McLean had two of the best coaches in the history of the region right there in the late 80s. They had you and Coach Priester. And, it's too bad for McLean that you guys didn't stay around longer, but what is it? Is it because of demographics in the outer part of the county? The schools are going to be big and great players, but somehow you guys ended up at Oakton and Chantilly. So
and Freddie and I were on the same football staff together, so we coached together, and I got to know Fred, and I had his daughter in class at Chantilly. He lives right close to Chantilly High School, so. I think probably for both of us, the move was about putting yourself in a situation where you were more likely to be successful. You know, bigger school, bigger demographics. And you know, I don't, you know, today, it seems like all the schools are big. You know, McLean's suddenly a Division VI big school, but back in the day, literally Chantilly was twice the size that McLean was. And I remember talking to Mark Martino and, you know, talking about the difference between McLean and Chantilly. And I remember him saying to me, like, you know, like this guy who's like a good player for you, we just have more of that guy. You know, you have one or two, we just have more of, you know, that type of player. So it was basically just, I think maybe for both of us, just kind of a numbers game at that time more than anything.
Yeah, and Chantilly even more than now, because Westfield wasn't open yet. So Chantilly seemed like they were, every year it seemed like you had, maybe you didn't have, you know, 5 Division I players, but they had some ball players on every team. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, all right, real quickly, who was a football coach that you coached under at McLean, and what did you learn from him?
Bill Hillbald was the head coach there.
He was at Robinson when I was there for some time. Yeah.
Bill, you know, I think probably the thing that I learned from Bill had times at McLean, and no fault of his. He's a very good coach. You know how it is. If you don't have the talent, it's hard to win. But you know, people don't want to hear that. I think Bill always showed great poise. I never really saw him lose his temper in what I would think were kind of trying, difficult times, and always kind of a perfect gentleman in terms of how he handled some of the adversity that came with not winning in the program. Yeah.
So you're going to go to Chantilly now, and they had a great run of teams right as you're arriving, and Martino, this big personality as the coach, always showing up the refs. A great coach, but he was a handful for officials. You're much more understated, you know, get the job done. What was it like replacing Martino? And you know, was that an exciting moment for you?
Yeah, it was exciting. And, you know, another reason for the move is I live and still live in the same house that's about 1 mile from Chantilly. So also made things nicer for me. I think obviously Mark and my personality are different, but I think for the kids, our players, there was some continuity there, because at the time, both of us were on the young side in terms of being head coaches. Both of us believed in motion offense, you know, ball and player movement. And both of us, you know, for the most part, played man-to-man defense. So our systems, I think, were similar. Now, I think how Mark came across with the kids and how he dealt with them was probably different from, you know, my persona a little bit. But I think there was enough things that were similar. It helped with the transition for the players. Yeah. Now, it was a difficult time. There were people in the community that really felt Stan Meadows, who was a great coach and was an assistant with Mark for a while, should have gotten the job. It was fortunate that I think for me that we got off running pretty quickly and had success my first year. Otherwise, I think there probably might have been some second guessing going forward, because they had a guy on staff, you know, who they could have just. And oftentimes when you have a successful program, that's kind of the route a lot of people will go, is just turn it over to the long-time assistant. Yeah.
Who did you have on that first team?
The best, I mean, we had a really nice team, but obviously Daryl Franklin was the headliner. And you'll have to check this for me. I think that Daryl is the only Northern Virginia player who was the All-Met Player of the Year. So I don't know that we've had many others, but he was not only, I tell people, guys, he's not just All-Met, he's the All-Met of All-Met. So Daryl absolutely carried us, but we had some nice kids. We had a post player, Keith Bond, who was a senior, who was rugged and tough. We had Shavis Steele, who actually was very talented. Shavis had gotten cut as a junior by Mark and kind of had a chip on his shoulder in his senior year and had a great year for me, made all district. We had a couple young wing players, the Justins, Justin Ancelotti, Justin McCarthy, who were good players for me. So we besides Daryl, but it's hard to say besides Daryl because he was the stir that he was the stir that stirred the drink. But we had some other guys who were pretty good players as well that supported him, and the group fit together well.
What made Daryl so special? He wasn't tall. He wasn't the fastest guy in the world. He was a good shooter. What made Daryl so special as a player? I mean, you're right. It's an amazing achievement for a Fairfax County public school player to be named Player of the Year. When you talk about the MATHA, WCAC, it's an enormous achievement for Daryl.
In his own way, he reminded me of Jordan in that he was just a ruthless competitor. He just would find a way to beat you. That being said, I don't think a lot of people who didn't see him every day do not realize what an explosive athlete he was. He would get the ball in his hands, and I have never had a high school player to this day that could go from hash to hash so fast with the ball. And obviously developed other parts of his game, became a really good three-point shooter his senior year. But I think more than anything, just his leadership. I mean, he led that group of guys and they looked to him like he was the Pied Piper. I mean, I remember we were playing Madison and we struggled that year with Madison in the regular season in South Lakes, and we finally beat him in the tournament. But I remember being over at Madison and calling a timeout and sitting down at the bench. Maybe Madison's gone on a run and we're down a little bit and everybody's mad and we're cussing, guys are walking off the court. And Daryl comes up to me just as I'm about to sit down. He goes, "Coach, I got this. And I just walk away and Daryl sits on the bench and he straightens the whole thing out and they go back out on the court. I'm like, "You're right. I'm not saying a word, Daryl," because those guys listened to him and his leadership was just something that you very seldom see from a high school kid.
But one thing you were able to do early in your Chantilly career, and also throughout your time, you always had good assistants. You had Doug Fulton,
right.
Coach McKegg. I'm going to forget good assistants. How were you able to get so many good people? And maybe tell us a little bit about some of your assistants and what you may have learned from them.
I have been very, very fortunate. And you mentioned Bob. You mentioned Doug Fulton. Chris Dukes was a very long time assistant for me, also a head coach at Oakton. Andrew Duggan, John King before that when I was at McLean. So I've had great assistants, and that's a gigantic part of my success, Julie. And I really, I think the longevity's played a part in it, but having great assistants and having great players. And one thing that I've always wanted in my assistant coaches was I didn't want yes men. Obviously I wanted guys who could teach the game, who could help me teach what my vision was for this group, but also who at times would disagree with me and give me different ideas and make me think a little bit. And I know that Bob McKegg is no yes man. And I think as a head coach, you can't be afraid to surround yourself with very strong people. And you can't muzzle them once you put them around you. And obviously, and I've had this conversation with them. Hey, place and time, not the time to disagree with me, right in front of the kids during the timeout, but definitely back in the office, right place and time. But I think, I think you got to really look for those guys out there who are going to add to what you bring to the table, just not try to be the complement all the time.
What did you learn from Coach McKegg? He was a great coach. I mean, he replaced Roscoe Dean at Robinson. Roscoe Dean was a really good coach, but at the end of his span, the team really struggled. Coach came in and turned it around right away, and made that run in the state. And he's a very unique guy. What are some of the things you may have learned from Coach?
Well, a couple of things with Bob. I learned not to drive in a car with him because the biggest lead foot. And every time I would get in the car and he was driving, I was scared for my life. So I learned that, first thing. Second thing, he is one of the best teachers of big men that I have ever been around.
Yeah.
And I love post play. I think it's become a lost art. I love the footwork. I love multiple moves. And Bob was just, you have him on your staff working with the big guys, man, you're in great shape. So I love that about Bob. And then the other thing that I think Bob helped me not set too low a goal. I know I used to, as a young coach, I would look at maybe the next couple of weeks and I would say stuff like, okay, now if we can get 2 out of 3 here, we're going to put ourselves in a good situation. Or if we can get a split this week, that's going to kind of set us up good. And whenever I would say something like that to Bob, Bob would say a couple things under his breath and go, why don't we just win them all, coach? Why 2 out of 3? Why split? Why don't you win every damn game? And I'm like, you're right. You're right. Why am I even thinking that way? So there's definitely some of the things I learned from Bob.
So Coach McKay did a lot for me. I tease about Coach, and coaches, you affect people, kids that you don't even remember the ways you affected them. But so when Coach came to Robinson, I was a 5'1" junior, a rising junior, and I'm 5'10" now, but I grew really late. So Coach McKay told me this story later. Roscoe Dean said, "Look, you have this kid named Julian Brown. He's a junior. He'll be a junior. You're not going to be able to cut this kid. Trust me." And Bob said he's a 5'1" junior. He's the first kid I'm going to cut. So we played summer league. You got to know us, and so the team the year before was 3-18. They really struggled, but they had this kid named Chuck Heaton. Chuck was a quarterback of the football team. He was a soccer goalie. He started games last year. His father was a summer league coach. His father was the head of the I think the Alumni Association or PTA or something. So he cut Chuck and kept me, and it was a huge move because Chuck was a pretty good player. He helped the year before, and I was a player that was going to help down the road. And my whole life would have changed. I mean, being a basketball player and then later on a coach. I played JV at UVA. A lot of my friends. I don't know how much of that would have happened if Coach McKay would have cut me. He had every reason to cut me, but he believed in me. And years later, I coached the summer league teams and all those things. I was always very loyal to him because he did a lot for me. But it's funny, he always gave me a hard time. He always laughed at me, but I never forgot what he did for me.
Your story is like warming to my heart because that's why we do this. That's why we do this, that we hope we make a difference. And that makes me feel good to hear that about Coach McKay. I always try to tell kids during tryouts, like, us coaches, we have a tough job. We got to evaluate you guys and we got to make some really, really hard decisions. It's the worst part of being a coach. But what your guys' job is to go out during these tryouts and make it really, really hard for us to cut you. And you just don't do that by kind of standing around the back of a line. Make a play out there, do something to catch an eye, but do something that's going to make us hard to cut you.
That's right. Yeah. So, well, anyway, a few years later, you actually coach Bob's son, Coach McKay's son, Matt. And
yes,
this is something that came out on the Facebook group. I didn't realize that. Matt, I thought, was one of the best players on that team. He's a great swing man. It turns out, of the starters, he was the only player that did not play Division I. I think on Matt's team, you might have had 4 Division I starters. And Matt, tell us a little bit about that team.
Well, so we won in the 90s, I guess, maybe 95 to 97. I want to say we won the district title 3 straight years. We had Derek Franklin, who was Daryl's brother, who was also an all-Met player. We had a young man, Kwame Afori, who was one of the best defenders, on-ball defenders I've ever coached. He played at the Naval Academy and was an outstanding player there and just a fine young man. I keep in touch with Kwame, and he's just a great, great young man. Matt Collins played at West Point, and they actually played against each other in the Army-Navy basketball game, Matt and Kwame. Trying to think, who am I forgetting in that group? And then obviously Matt played Division III basketball. Probably couldn't be Mike Scott. Oh, Brian White. Brian White was a big kid and 6'7", good shooter. went to one of the Patriot School teams for a year or two. I think played at Lehigh, I want to say. Then we had another boy, Mike Scott, I think, who walked on at Cal Irvine. So there are a lot of good players in that group, and obviously you got to have some good players if you're going to win, our district 3 times in a row.
Yeah. What are some of your other favorite teams and players that you coach over here? So obviously, we're gonna hedge on this and say that you love all your players, and you can't remember them all, offhand. What are some of your other great players and teams you had over the years?
Well, yeah, I enjoyed that group that you're mentioning. Over 3 years, and that was like 2 or 3 different teams, and some other guys that played in that group. There's a young man, Shagun Odalawu, who picked up the game late and actually ended up walking on at Houston and playing there. He had a great career. Derek Graham and Derek Franklin. I had my Dereks in the backcourt. That was a team we lost to a Stuart team that was just loaded and good. That group was just so fun. Mike Desmond played for me during that time period. He's now the head coach at South Lakes. And I had another young man, D. King, who was 5'0", but just could shoot the ball with like an assassin's heart. So that whole group that played for me over those 3 years was just fun. And then obviously in my later years, my teams from about 2007 to 2010 that included John Manning and Keithan Savage, Jake Wiegand, Matt Howerton, Adam Friday. I think we won the district a couple times, and then we won the region ultimately in 2010. And that was just a great group of guys to coach. And Devin Ballum and John played for me for 4 years, started from freshman up through their senior year. So those guys probably played more varsity basketball games than anybody in the history of Chantilly high schools. So really great group of kids to have.
So who are some of the toughest competitors coaching wise? Are there any coaches that you had a really difficult time with? And we already talked about one Coach Byrd, so we don't have to talk about Coach. But are there some guys there that were really tough or tricky just for you, or maybe the luck wasn't always there?
Well, obviously Gary Hall, Gary and I and again, this is something to look up. I'm of the opinion that Gary and I maybe have coached more games against each other than any 2 coaches in the history of the Northern region. That's like 25 years of oftentimes playing 3 times a year.
Yeah.
So, and Gary, again, his teams always played hard. They ran good stuff, and man, were they talented, Scotty Reynolds was just such a handful to play against. So, Herndon always had great teams. Charlie Thompson's teams when he went to Hayfield always had, really, really good teams. Those 2 guys. And then, of course, Charlie, before going to Hayfield, he was at Oakton for a few years. And we really hadn't had much of a rivalry with Oakton. We'd kind of owned them for a while. And then suddenly Charlie came there and the dynamics changed and their gym was packed. And those were exciting games. And, you always knew what Charlie's teams were going to run, but man, they executed. We would try to press them and get the game fast and make them uncomfortable offensively. And then the next thing you know, it's in the 4th quarter and there's 3 minutes left and you look at the scoreboard, it's 53-51. And I'm going, this was the game I did not want to play against him.
Yeah.
Find a way to make it be his game, which would drive me crazy in all honesty. But Gary and Charlie are obviously 2 guys that jumped to the front, having to coach against them for so many years.
Yeah. So when did you stop coaching at Chantilly? What year was that?
I guess 18 was the last year there.
Oh wow! So it's relatively recent. And you retired from teaching at the same time?
I got out teaching a year earlier and then coached 1 more year. I coached my son his senior year, so I was really happy to get to do that. So
okay. And then are you going to teach at Meridian as well?
I'm just going to coach.
Oh wow! So you can really focus on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I told him, listen, I'm going to walk around. I'll be there during the day. walking the hallways, making sure my boys are in class, and I'll go down and look at film a little bit, but I'm going to try to be active in the community, even though I'm not teaching there every day.
Yeah. Well, look, Coach, I live close to George Meridian, so I'm definitely going to come check out one of your games. You've had a great career. I really appreciate you doing this. It's been exciting. I love talking to the coaches because you guys just have so much history, and the players, the other coaches, but also so many of the coaches who coached here also played here. I can't tell you how many. Even Charlie played football at the Falls Church and basketball. I mean, Wickline played here. Red Jenkins played for Mount Vernon. I'd probably say 80% of the guys I talked to played football and basketball in the northern region. So it's great to hear the history and hear these names again. I was really interested to hear about Oliverio because I've heard so much about him over the years. It's like almost a legend. So I'm glad we were able to do that.
Well, and Julian, there's Oliverio brothers. So not only Dave, but then his brother Dave was also a great player for Woodson as well. So I'll give you a real quick funny story.
Sure, yeah.
Red's kind of renowned for his recruiting. So he heard about and I don't know if Red told you the story, and I might get it a little bit wrong, but I think the main parts are right. Red heard about a couple brothers that lived down in West Virginia who were great basketball players. So he took a drive down there and met the brothers and met the father. And the father said, well, I'm not moving. Red said, what if we get you a job teaching in Fairfax County? And the next thing you know, Mr. Oliverio is in Fairfax County, and the Oliverio boys are scoring lots of points for Woodson High School. So you might check with Red. I don't think I'm too off on that one.
Red has an excuse for every kid that happened to appear at Woodson. Every single. So I talked to Red, and when I ask about a kid, like I ask about Greg Williams or whoever, he'd always ask, like I asked him, how did Greg Williams get there? No, I didn't ask. All I said was, what was it like coaching Greg Williams?
Do you know the Martino story about the starting lineups?
No.
So, and again, this might be an urban legend, but it's been a few years. But the story goes, when Mark was at, I think at Braddock, not at Chantilly, he announced the Woodson starting lineup. And he did it this way: starting at guard from Falls Church, a junior; starting at Ford from Annandale, and he listed the actual place that each of them were from, which wasn't zip code. That's one to check out. But
when I interviewed Chris Naki, so I asked where he's from, and he said I was from Mantua. I was like, you're actually in the Woodson area. And
Tommy Amaker, check that one out.
Yeah, well,
Tommy's a Falls Church kid.
Yeah, there's so many. I did a couple podcasts with Mount Vernon players and also TC players. And my senior year at Robinson, the kids I played against. So I played against the TC players that went to Hammond and George Washington. But every single school, Edison had Kelly Catron. Fort Hunt had Carlos Martin. Mount Vernon had Frankie Smith. Every school had players that had played for TCU for the Alexandria middle schools that I played against. And then in varsity, they were all somewhere else. So,
and back in my day, Derek Steele was the handful.
Yeah, he's a great player.
Mount Vernon, boy, he was a great football, basketball player.
Derek was a fascinating guy. I did a podcast involved with Mount Vernon players, and Derek was on the call. And I didn't know Derek that well. I had played against him. He played for Brook Rental, which is a great team in the Indiana Summer League. So every year they won it. They had Derek, they had Eric Brent, they had Brian Miller. And so I didn't know him well, refereed his games and stuff. Had tremendous respect for him, the way he carried himself. He was just a leader, great player. Derek wasn't the most talented basketball player in the world, but he just got it done. You're talking about Daryl Franklin competitiveness. Yes. I don't think I've ever met a more competitive person than Derek Steele. He's just a fierce competitor. So, there's so much legend with that. But, the thing about that is I actually like the fact that the kids stayed in the public schools.
Right.
Nowadays, when they leave us, they go to private school. And, it's one thing that we could probably end on is, what do you think about the schools? I mean, obviously, the northern region, the public school basketball is never going to be the way it used to be. But what do you think about all the kids that go to private schools, the kids that reclass before they get or they reclass during their private school tenure? What do you think about that? Is it a shame, or do you think it's just the way it is and we have to embrace
I do think it's a shame. And I think to a certain extent, I think a lot of the kids are missing the boat. And the reason I say that is first off, if they're good enough, they're going to be seen no matter where they play. And we all know that it's the AAU and the summer circuit where they get seen more than the winter. The second thing, I remember John Manning saying to me, my big 6'11" center who chose not to go to the privates, who chose to stay at Chantilly, there is nothing like playing in front of the people that you went to elementary school with, that you grew up with, that are in your community coming out to cheer for you. And then I think lastly, I got to drink some water here. I think people don't realize that the education and the education level of the teachers in our public schools far exceeds the educational level and the teaching that goes on in the private schools. I'm just a big fan of Fairfax County public schools, and I don't think we do a good enough job telling people what a wonderful educational experience for free that kids get going to our schools. So again, I think they're missing the boat a little bit.
Well, look at you. You went to St. John's and you taught 5 history classes. And you had, I mean, you're a smart guy, you're well educated,
right,
but you had no idea how to teach kids. You learned on the job at private school. Yeah.
That's
and
correct.
that could probably never happen in Fairfax County, right?
It could not. No. I had to prove that I could teach before I could get a job in a Fairfax County building. And even then, once I started teaching, I had to get my master's and, do some things like that to continue, my development as a teacher.
When you were at Chantilly, did you go meet Manning's parents when he was in middle school to make sure they stayed in this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you do as a public school coach, when you have a great player in your community, I think it's important that you go out and recruit your own. So I talked to the Mannings. I had some parents of my former players contact him and tell him a little bit about me and the program, went to his games, and we put on the full court press to try to get John in our building. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll end on this. Back in the old days, what official, other than me, what official were you the most excited to see when they entered your gym?
Oh my goodness! Obviously, you first. I like Adam Brick.
Yeah, Adam's great.
Yeah, I think Adam's good, and I'm sure there's some officials that didn't like me too much. But the thing I liked about Adam, he'd always talk to you, and I know like some referees, I guess, don't want to be seen talking to coaches. Maybe it would make the other coach feel like you're cozying up to them. But again, almost like we talked about with players, I think the communication is so important to a nicely run game. If everybody's communicating, then maybe nobody gets, too far or too upset. But I always like those referees who would say, no, that's not what I saw. I saw this, or maybe even you might be right, but you know what? That's what I called. And you can live with that and then move on. The ones that just won't even pay attention to you would kind of get me upset sometimes.
The thing I like about Adam, most of it, he's a good ref, he communicates well, like you said, is that the biggest fear coach has is your best players getting fouls early in the game. And Adam is not going to call a lot of like ticky-tack fouls. He's going to call the fouls that matter. And as a coach, you don't want your best players getting. That's the biggest thing you worry about is your best players getting in foul trouble. And because when that happens, you lose control of what you want to do.
Isn't that the thing that makes the game basketball so exciting? Because there's so many variables that you can play the same team that can lead to a widely different outcome. 3-point shooting. One night you hit those shots, another night you don't hit the same shots by the same guys. Basketball is the only sport where literally your best player, because of fouls, may only play half the game. Other sports, it would take injury to take your best player out of the game. But basketball, fouls, your best player doesn't play, and suddenly the game's very different. So that's one of the things that makes it so almost intoxicating, is the game can be so different from night to night.
That's one thing I respect about the guys like you are able to do, in that you have all these variables and you can't predict everything, and you got to somehow try to impose your will. Like, you're not going to win every night, but you figure if you do things a certain way, you figure things out, the percentages go your way, and all you can do is try to play those odds. You can't control everything.
Right, and that's why as a coach, if you can, some teams you have are so limited, you basically, things have to go a certain way for you to win. And that's my teams that were in that boat, I would get much more upset about the refereeing than other teams who could win in multiple ways. You have to, some nights maybe we win because we shoot it great. Other nights we win because we press people out of the gym. Other nights maybe we just hammer people on the glass. I mean, your really good teams can win in a number of different ways. When you know as a coach, all this has to go right, then suddenly you're also worried about how the refereeing goes as well, which is not really a place where you want to be as a coach. You don't have to worry about that.
Also, one last question. What about role models on TV? Who are your, for college coaches, pro coaches, if anybody, who is a person that you've respected a lot and try to play like, or at least try to influence your team in the way that person influences their team?
I think the two college, and I'm also one of those guys who does like the NBA. I'm not a guy that says, NBA. I love the NBA, but I think I was very fortunate, Julian. As a young man, I went to the North Carolina basketball school. And I still have one of my things downstairs is a certificate signed by Dean Smith that says, you have completed this course. You are now a member of the North Carolina basketball program. I have that in a proud place. But I love North Carolina. I love Dean Smith. Again, you talk about motion offense, scramble defense, things like that. I've got all his books and all his tapes, and I always loved the way he carried himself. I don't know that I always carry myself as much as a gentleman as he is, but it's something for me to strive for. And then, taking that extension, Coach Krzyzewski, again, the motion offense and the man-to-man defense. And those were two guys that I always respected, both the way they taught the game, but also how they related to their players and how they, acted as men in their community. So I think both those guys have that's high standards, obviously, but, two guys that I've tried to emulate in some way, I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, look, Coach is great. I never, as you were saying before, you didn't say a lot to the refs, so I never really got a chance to know you want to referee your game. I know if you're hanging around Coach McKay, you got to be okay.
Thank you, Julian.
But I always respected your work from afar. Your players played hard, won a lot of big games, and I just know you're going to have a great time and you're going to have a lot of success at your new gig. So I'm looking forward to coming down there and checking you guys out.
Please come down. I think we're going to have an exciting group. I'm really, I'm looking forward to being able to get into more with them, and hopefully we get all this virus stuff and everything in the rear view mirror and back to basketball like we've known it in the past in this area.
Yeah, that'll be great. I think we'll find out if they can get last season completed. This season we should be able to work it out.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Okay, again, Coach. Well, look, I really appreciate it. It was great catching up. Let's keep in touch, and I will definitely see you soon.
Thank you so much, Julian. I enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, thank you, Coach. Great seeing you again, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.